Yes, I'm just here backup.
Okay, great. Thanks very much. Anne Marie
And
DeRay,
yes, present.
Isabel Duron,
Here.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Here.
Fred Fisher,
Here.
Elena Flowers,
Present.
Judy Gasson,
Here.
Larry Goldstein,
Here.
David Higgins,
Here.
Vito Imbasciani,
Present.
Steve Julesgaard,
Present.
Rich Lahara,
Here.
Pat Levitt, Linda Malkus,
Here.
Shlomo Melmed,
Here.
Chris Miaskowski,
Present.
Lauren Miller Rogan,
Here.
Adriana Padilla, Joe Panetta,
Here.
Marv Southard,
Here.
Michael Stamos,
Here.
Carol Watson, Hal Collard for Keith Yamamoto,
Here.
and Kevin Zhu. Thank you, Vito. We have a quorum.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you, everyone, again. Oh, someone just joined. Does that sound mean someone joins the meeting, Claudette?
Yes.
Okay. So, members of the board, there are two items on the agenda, and I'm going to tell you what they are, and I would like to entertain discussion of them in the order in which I present them. The first, I'm going to ask the board to authorize the creation of a presidential search committee of the board. This group of board members will oversee the selection of an executive search firm for a permanent new chief executive officer and president of CIRM. It will oversee efforts in the conducting of that national and possibly international search. It will vet candidates for that position, and it will recommend finalists to this board. I envision that the committee will probably meet monthly. We wouldn't want something that's so large that creates scheduling difficulties and becomes unwieldy in its internal mechanisms. And I'm very grateful for some board members who volunteered. I have a list of 11 names. Some of them volunteered, some were picked by board leadership, and some were recommended by the governance subcommittee. All categories of board members are represented, and we factored in things like who has available time to serve on this extraordinarily important committee and who had other committee responsibilities. To that end, I have the following names: Muhammad Abusalem, Kim Barrett, George Blumenthal, Anne Marie Dulege, Fred Fisher, Judy Gasson, Steve Julesgaard, Leandra Clark Harvey, Joe Panetta, and the vice chair and the chair, Maria Bonneville, and myself. I can tell you that Kim Barrett and George Blumenthal have agreed to serve as co-chairs of the Presidential Search Committee of the board. Let me just tell you what the second item of business will be before we start discussion on the first item. The second item will be to appoint an interim leader of CIRM, and we will conduct this in a series of open discussion, followed by a closed discussion, and coming back into open session. The topics I anticipate that will be discussed with regard to the interim leader as the merits of choosing an internal versus an external interim, the salary considerations, time commitment of the individual, and percent effort. We, of course, need to come into open session and conduct votes on that selection when the time comes. Okay, so with that, I would like to start discussion in open session of our first item of business, the selection of the Presidential Search Committee. Does anyone have comments?
Deborah has her hand
Yes.
raised.
Yes, I reviewed the slate membership, and I believe that we've developed an excellent slate with great chairs, and I would support this.
Thank
I'm
you.
at the point where I can make a motion, but of course, there may be more discussion.
Well, it's appropriate, Deborah, to make a motion so that it tailors the discussion. Yes.
Yes, well, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the slate as submitted for the search committee as well as the search committee chairs, co-chairs.
This is Linda Malkus. I'd like to second that.
Perfect. Thank you. Further discussion on our committee.
Mr. Chair, sorry, I didn't raise my hand.
Isabel, thank you.
Is it appropriate at this point in time to have a discussion about the character and et cetera of the person that they should be looking for?
Isabel, of course, we can discuss anything at the board. This could be a discussion that has no end, at least for the 2 hours time commitment that we've set aside for this. And I do think it would probably be the first order of business of that subcommittee, to which all board members can give input.
Isabel, the thought is that this subcommittee would meet prior to the December 14th board meeting and initiate a conversation around criteria and qualifications of the next CEO, and then bring that to the board for full discussion in December. That's currently the plan, but it will definitely come to the board for full conversation before anything moves forward from a selection, time frame or anything like that.
Thanks,
So
Maria.
so you're suggesting that we hold back on guidance at this moment?
At this moment, because we're only appointing our own members to a committee. Yes, but Isabel, I'm with you on that. It is the most important of the discussions that they will have.
Right. And so I thought it appropriate to have the discussion, a little bit of a discussion, simply as they start thinking about this and the criteria, that those criteria are guided in some ways by this discussion. But if you think that we can hold off, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't think anything will be lost.
Okay, they better get it right.
So we have a motion on the floor. Is there any other discussion on the tasking of the Presidential Search Committee or its membership and its leadership? Okay. Is there anyone out there just cogitating, like, wants to reserve some time on this topic? If not, okay. Scott, I think we can call the question and the roll.
Sure. Let me just check first with the team to see if there's any public comment on the line.
No hands raised.
All right. Great. So the motion is to approve the slate for the Presidential Search Subcommittee as proposed, including the co-chairs. Jim Kovach,
Yes.
George Blumenthal,
Yes.
Maria Bonneville,
Yes.
Judy Chow, Leandra Clark Harvey,
Yes.
Deborah Dees,
Yes.
Anne Marie DeLege,
Yes.
Isabelle Luron,
Yes.
Mark Fisher Colbury,
Yes.
Fred Fisher,
Yes.
Elena Flowers,
Yes.
Judy Gasson,
Yes.
Larry Goldstein,
Yes.
David Higgins,
Yes.
Vito Imbasciani,
Yes.
Steve Julesgaard,
Yes.
Rich Lahara,
Yes.
Linda Malkus,
Yes.
Shlomo Melmed,
Yes.
Chris Miaskowski,
Yes.
Lauren Miller-Rogan,
Yes.
Joe Panetta,
Yes.
Marv Southard, Michael Stamos,
Yes.
Hal Collard.
Yes.
Are there any board members whose names I haven't called? Great. Thanks very much, Vito. The motion carries.
Thank you, and thank you for all the board members that volunteered, for those that agreed to serve at our invitation, and thank you especially to Kim Barrett and George Blumenthal for agreeing to be co-chairs of this very important committee. I appreciate your service. So we move on to our second item of business this morning, the appointment of an interim leader. The conversation will start in open discussion. Please be mindful that in open discussion, it would probably be more apropos and politic, small p, if we do not mention individuals' names, but rather categories or generalized descriptions. Specific discussions of individuals will take place in closed session.
Steve has his hand raised.
Steve Julesgaard, okay, thank you. You can start.
Yeah, so actually for me, the starting point is not, who we're going to name as an interim president, but actually whether we need an interim president. I think we need to start with that discussion because it's not clear to me that that's the case. And what I've been trying to do is to identify what important things might happen, let's say for the next 6 months. My hope is that we maybe will have somebody on board 6 months from now that would require somebody to serve at the role of the president. The most important of those things will be a budget for the coming fiscal year. But apart from that, it seems to me that whatever major initiatives are going on can be put on pause for a while. There's nothing that I'm aware of that requires immediacy in terms of any initiatives we got. They can be held. And we can run basically as we have been, dealing with all the research programs that normally come our way, in which are adequately handled by, by Gil Sembrano or whoever it is that's presenting whatever they are. So I, for one, am not convinced. And given the fact that we have actually an excellent chairman and an excellent vice chairman, who are very, very capable and could, I think, be involved a little bit more in terms of whatever things that a president might be essential for, as I said, the biggest one being a budget. So I'm not exactly sure that we need an interim president, but I'll leave it there because I'm curious as to what others might think.
Thank you, Steve. My display of board members means I have to scroll constantly.
Fred has his hand raised.
Thank you.
And then Deborah and then Joe.
Oh, I love that. Thank you. Fred Fisher.
Yeah, I'm raising my hand in support of what Steve raised because I too would need to be convinced that there is so much pressing business that the president and CEO must attend to that could not be delegated to other members of the leadership team on the staff or to the chair or vice chair, or for that matter, to any board members that might need to make an appearance somewhere that would ordinarily be the president and CEO appearing. So I too agree that for a 6-month period, it seems likely to me that we could do without a chair and vice chair and have any essential responsibilities delegated to other members of the team and the board.
Deborah, I think is next.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to take a different approach, or not approach, but opinion to this, and state that I would be supportive of having an interim, remembering that we are doing the work on behalf of the people of California. When we set out to do this, we felt it was necessary to have not only a person in the president's role, but also a CEO. And I will think that the implication to the people of not having an interim, it minimizes the role of the president and the CEO. That person is not there just to do the day-to-day transactional things, but to provide vision and leadership. We've launched a strategic plan, and there are other activities that are ongoing that should need the leadership of an individual to help steer it. And as we think about a new president and CEO, I'm hearing that we are going to have the committee meet on a monthly basis. I'm also hearing that it's going to take 6 months. And if we could operate CIRM for 6 months without a president and a CEO, perhaps we need to rethink whether we need a president and a CEO. I think in any organization as large and that is doing this meaningful work that we are doing, we really need someone at the helm, and it shouldn't be the chair and co-chair of the board reaching in to the day-to-day function of CIRM.
So I have 4 hands up. If it doesn't, hope it
There are
doesn't
5
matter.
hands, Vito.
5
It's
hands.
Joe, Mark, Judy, Linda, and Anne Marie.
Okay, Joe, and then Joe followed by Mark Fisher Colby. Then Mr. Panetta, thank you.
Thanks, Vito. I come at this really from the standpoint of having been somewhat surprised by the crisis situation that seems to exist at a staff level, and the fact that the staff seem to be a little bit challenged from a morale standpoint with the previous leadership under Maria. And so the way I approached this was to think, how can we deal with what seems to me to be, if I read it correctly and heard it correctly, right now, a bit of I guess I'll call it a crisis from a staff level. And so I would agree that with what Steve said, that there's one big issue that needs to be dealt with now, and that's to get the budget done. I would say that I think the leadership that Vito and Maria provide could carry us very well for 6 months on the outside. But I do think we need someone who can come in and manage in what I believe and interpret to be a crisis situation, and work to build a little bit more unity, I think, on the staff in preparation for the next leader of CIRM. So my thinking on this was that it would be appropriate to try to find someone who understands the organization well and has worked with the organization and can deal with this issue, and I think, you know, on Steve's point, to work with the team on the budget as well. Not an interim CEO who is an all-encompassing CEO, And maybe it doesn't need to be someone whom we call the CEO, but I think someone needs to be at the helm.
Thank you, Joe. Mark. Followed by
I
Judy.
think somebody needs to be.
I'm sorry, followed by
Yeah.
Judy Gilson and Linda Malkus. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, I think somebody has to be. I think somebody has to be at the helm. I think that's a very important consideration. There's a lot of moving parts of activities that are coming up, and as always, we continue to be at important junctures related to prioritization around portfolio, budgetary activity. There are the ongoing, continuing efforts of reestablishing how we interact internally from a staffing perspective in terms of readjusting to post-COVID life. So there's somebody's got to be in charge, and I think that's then incumbent to get somebody to fill that role. Obviously, that person can be supported by the very talented chair and vice chair and other members of the board for other purposes and external activities. But I think somebody's got to be helping to make allocation decisions, adjudication decisions, and providing leadership in the context that the current staff already is extremely full with their responsibilities, and to have a central node for decision-making will be very important.
Thank you, Mark. It's Judy Gasson, followed by Linda Malkus and Anne Marie Zulej.
Thank you, Vito. I'm speaking on behalf of Pat Levitt and I, who are co-chairs of the Governance Subcommittee. Pat's in Mexico today, opening up a new pediatric clinic that he's been working on for 3 years. But we discussed this extensively over the weekend. And what Pat would like to say is whatever it is that I say, he would have said it stronger. So the first point, and we haven't met with the committee, this is just Pat and I as the co-chairs. So the first point I would make is that we've really recently just appointed a chair and a vice chair of the board at a 100% effort. So presumably we have outlined enough duties to keep them busy full time. I agree with the previous 3 speakers that there's a number of policies and procedures that really need review and potentially restructuring. And I would particularly call out the HR issues that have been alluded to. The board has expressed a desire for prioritization of scientific opportunities going forward, and it would be great to have the leadership team and an acting CEO participate fully in those discussions that will be led by the Science Subcommittee. And as was previously said, I think we do need to provide support and leadership to the very strong team that we have in place, and that working also with that leadership team and the board together to continue to move this organization forward. And finally, my last point is that we're going to, at some point, have a new CEO and president. I hope it's in 6 months. There's no way to know for sure whether it will be in 6 months. But we were going to need to provide a very strong handoff to that new person. And I think having an interim person in the position that can enable that strong handoff to the new CEO and the new president is really critical for us to get the right leader. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Judy, for those remarks. Linda Malkus, please.
Hi, I want to echo or totally agree with the comments of Deborah and Joe and Mark and Judy. And if I missed anybody, I'm sorry, but I totally agree with them. And I just want to add that I think it's really important for this agency, this is an agency, that there is a clear separation between the roles of the president and CEO in terms of, their logistics, they're the operational piece. We are, and you, Vito and Maria, not that you wouldn't be wonderful, but you are oversight. And those are very, very separate roles. And I like what Deborah said, if we could do 6 months or a year without a president and CEO, well, why would you have them, And also you have a very, very full plate, I'll be very honest, of things that you and Maria are charged with in this very, as it was, I'm echoing before, a very, very full menu. of things that you have to take care of. So I would argue that we do need a separate or an individual that would be charged with carrying out the logistics and the function of CIRM, and that we maintain our role as oversight. And also this person would be needed to actually help clean up some of the troubles that have been voiced before. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have two hands raised, Anne-Marie Deleige, followed by Steve Julesgaard.
Right. I agree with the comments that have been made. In addition, I also believe that while we say it's going to take about 6 months, or I think we're all saying a minimum of 6 months realistically, and we all have seen hirings of that critical nature taking more than that, usually up to 12 months. And then there will be also the hands off as well. So I think the needs will very likely exceed 6 months and for that interim role, and may likely spill over the entire next year, very likely. The second thing is, I'm sure I'll preach will be the choir, but hopefully we'll find an interim CEO who knows CIRM very well, who knows Sacramento very well, so that the learning curve on that role is minimal. That's it for me.
Thank you very much. Steve, back to you.
Yeah, so I think what we have is a difference of opinion on the role of an interim president. So for me, and this is, the case in my experience, an interim president is somebody who just keeps the hand on the tiller and the ship running steady and doesn't launch off in a bunch of new directions. You really want to wait for the new CEO to come on board before you do things like that. So, for example, I think Mark reminisced or talked about the notion of, reprioritization. I would not touch that at all until we have somebody new on board. If there are major decisions that need to get made, we need to do that when we have the kind of person leading this organization on board, not before then. And my view of the role of an interim president is just to kind of keep the things running the way they are without doing too much new. And that's why I basically said that, I think that for me, the major thing is just the budget exercise. But the Neuro Task Force, anything that comes out of there, I would wait till the new CEO comes aboard. Prioritization, I would wait. I would wait for any major initiative until somebody new is on board so that they can help lead how we think about those efforts.
Okay, thank you very much. I have two new hands up now. Leandra Clark Harvey, followed by Fred Fisher.
Thank you so much. And I want to echo 1000% what Steve just shared. That is my take as well on what would be most kind of appropriate, someone to just kind of right the ship. And I think we have great confidence in existing senior level staff that would be able to do that. In addition, they have good relationships with the staff, some of whom were potentially disgruntled or unhappy. So I do have confidence that that would be okay. And then also the timing of this, we are upon the holidays. So there's going to be a lull anyways in engagement, and folks will be on vacation. So I think that that will allow us a little bit of time to get together and discuss this in more depth. It will allow the staff to have a bit of a break, continued break, and then to come back. That is how I see the role as an interim. And I just think that we have existing resources to help fill that capacity.
Okay, thank you. And back to Fred Fisher.
Yeah, so I'm happy to welcome Leandra to the Fred, Steve, and Leandra party. I think, Steve has mapped it out really well. The first thing I thought about in talking about an interim CEO in this kind of organization is they're basically going to be a lame duck. They're not going to launch any new big initiatives. They're going to keep their hand on the tiller, be someone that people can go to. And should it be that person who is very familiar with CIRM, whoever that might be, they're going to lean heavily on the staff anyway to inform thinking about any decisions that would be major, and frankly, any decisions that would be major would likely come back to the board anyway. And an interim CEO is not going to have enough background or information to meaningfully inform those decisions anyway, without the input of the staff. So, I think the message to Californians is we are being efficient with their money, and we do not confuse the role of an interim CEO with a permanent president and CEO, because a permanent president and CEO is necessary, but to spend the money on an interim doesn't seem like the most productive use of taxpayer dollars. And frankly, that's a message that might be helpful to us. The end.
Okay, I see a couple of more hands up. So it's going to be now Deborah Deese, followed by George Blumenthal.
So I see a role as the interim differently as well. And I don't believe that a person who serves in the interim role is sort of a placeholder. And because things develop within organizations that we may not have anticipated, and we need someone to be able to deal with those things. I have had that experience of serving in an interim role, and during that time, I hired new chairs. I helped lead a strategic plan. And while we're thinking about 6 months, it may not, it may be longer than 6 months. Once we've identified a candidate, they may not be ready to move right away. So we're then longer than 6 months. And the work that we have to do is beyond human resources work, personnel work. And we need to keep things moving. And as we move forward, new things may develop and we may have to pivot. And that's why the interim will then turn to the oversight group, the board, as well as the chair and co-chair for assistance. But to just be a placeholder and hold things at bay, I think is beyond the role of an interim.
Okay. There are two hands again. I just want to make an observation before George and then Leandra speaks again. And that is, if there are no hands up after Leandra, we're going to go into closed session. Thank you. George.
Yeah, thank you. I've been listening to the argument on both sides of this issue, and I think both sides make good points. But ultimately, I would reflect also the comments that Deborah just made. I think it really would be beneficial in this particular case to have an interim. It is true that we don't want an interim to be making grand new initiatives and decisions that will change the course of CIRM for a decade to come. On the other hand, decisions come down all the time when you're a chief executive. Some of them are smaller, some of them are larger. And it makes me somewhat uncomfortable to think about not having a hand at the helm who's capable of making, the smaller or medium-sized decisions, even if we don't want them to make the big long-term decisions during this interim period. I also think that it is certainly true that Vito and Maria are perfectly capable of doing oversight of the organization. On the other hand, it makes me somewhat uncomfortable to have a board which has an oversight authority to actually take on the management of an organization. I think it sets a bad precedent, and I think it could be a worrisome thing for a new candidate or a new president coming in who might be uncomfortable with the nature of the governance prior to his or her arrival. So while I think both sides have strong arguments, I actually would come down on the side of thinking that we do need an interim president.
Leandra and then Isabel. Leandra.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And I really respect your comments, George. I do think that as we think about this, that context matters. So yes, there are lots of different interim models, but I think the context is very important. There's a difference between an interim that's potentially stepping into an academic department to lead and make some very critical decisions that need to be made on a day-to-day basis and maybe big projects versus a nonprofit. So I think that all of that has to be taken into account just to make sure that we're all very clear on what the expected roles and responsibilities would be for a so-called interim or anyone else within the senior leadership team or board leadership team that might be able to exact those functions. And then also remembering that the board does have oversight of an interim or anyone else that might be a colleague or within the organization as well. So it's not as though we're passing it off to someone to make decisions that aren't, in consultation with the board. So I just really would advocate for clarity as we move forward on what the roles and responsibilities are within the context, because I think we all come to this with the lens of, well, I was part of a board or an organization that had an interim and it went this way, or these were the decisions. Just really want that clarity. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Isabel, please.
Thank you, Leandra. I wish my nonprofit had $5 billion. That's a big lift, and but I do appreciate all of the arguments. They're both compelling, but I do believe, and somewhat to what Fred referred to, I do believe that we do owe a lot to the people of California, our funders, and they deserve full leadership of an agency that they are funding. They would look at that and say, oh, they don't need one? Okay, why are we funding that job? I think context, it also sends messages externally about who's running what. And I think that a good interim knows their place and knows what they're there for, obviously adequately had conversations with everybody, including governance and leadership and so on and so forth. But I think we really do need, if you want to call them a placeholder. I think that it sends also a message to the staff that there will be someone there to address their concerns who doesn't have interpersonal relationships, but will take a very broad and objective look at the concerns. And so I would favor both Deborah and George's and all of those arguments for an interim leader. Thank you.
Okay, since going into closed section in no way curtails the discussion that we are having that is very robust, and I compliment the board members for sculpting your remarks in the most efficient manner. I really appreciate that. So Scott, may I ask you to do the necessary magic to bring us into closed session?
Sure. First, I'll read the citation of the authority to enter into closed session, and then I'll ask the team to provide the pop-up link that will take us to the breakout room for the board members to convene to. So we'll be adjourning to closed session for a discussion of personnel, consideration of interim president, CEO candidates. This is pursuant to Government Code Section 11126, Subdivision A, and Health and Safety Code Section 125290.30, Subdivision small f 3, capital D. And you should be seeing an invitation to join breakout room from Doug Yen, so please click join. Hi, Claudette and Doug and Lana. We are coming back into open session.
Okay, perfect.
So just give us a moment. It looks like everyone has made it through the ether back to this room. Vito, you're still muted.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody, for coming back. We're now in open session again. No action was taken, but I want to inform the public that at the next meeting of the Independent Citizens Oversight Committee of CIRM, the board, will take up, this is this Thursday, December 14th. I'm going to ask that we agendize 2 items. One is a description, a list of responsibilities for the interim CEO. And the second item to agendize is the selection and vote to confirm the interim CEO. That will be put off until the December 14th meeting. Scott, then do we, there's nothing to vote on at this point. Do we have any public comment on any issue?
That's correct. Team, do we have any public comment on an issue not agendized on this agenda?
There are no hands raised.
All right, Vito, then we are free to adjourn.
We are free to adjourn. Thank you very much, everyone. I'll see you on December 14th.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks.